This New Jersey mayor is accused of a shocking crime, arrested for allegedly driving drunk with her 2-year-old in the back seat. And that's not the only news in South Jersey this politician has been making in recent weeks.
You're proud of yourself.
You have no idea what I've been through.
Wow.
This video you have to see to believe. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. We're following a story out of New Jersey that is getting a lot of attention. The story of a woman arrested on St. Patrick's Day accused of driving drunk with her 2-year-old in their car seat in the back. And when police arrested the woman, they say that she had an open container of alcohol in her car. This is Gina LaPlaca. If you live in Lumberton, New Jersey, it's about a 40-minute drive from Philadelphia. You call her mayor. She's a Democrat. Here she is with former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. She also recently worked as the business administrator for Lumberton Township on the Jersey Shore. According to the Asbury Park Press, she resigned from that job about a week before her arrest. She told the newspaper she was leaving the position after roughly 3 years because of the changing political environment. Now let's turn to what allegedly happened on St. Patrick's Day around 6 p.m. Another driver allegedly captured video of a vehicle that was unable to stay in its lane and nearly hit a utility pole. That video was passed along to local police, and officers tracked the car to LaPlaca's house a short time later. In the back seat of her vehicle, her 2-year-old still strapped into their car seat. LaPlaca allegedly told police she had recently picked up her son from daycare. She also allegedly admitted to drinking while driving. Police found an open container of alcohol in her back seat. The mayor was put under arrest and charged with driving under the influence, reckless driving, and endangering the welfare of a child. LaPlaca's husband is a firefighter, and he posted this on Facebook shortly after news of her arrest. Jason Carty wrote, quote, "Millions of Americans struggle with addiction and never get help. Gina LaPlaca is someone who has struggled and is now getting the help she needs. I ask that everyone keep her in their thoughts as she moves forward on her road to recovery. Please ignore the exaggerated political hyperbole and keep in mind her passion for helping others. This should not erase all the things she has accomplished for our community. Gina is a loving and caring mother and stepmom to our son and her stepson. Our oldest is a teenager and can see the unkind things being said online. I ask that you respect our privacy, be better humans, and please show some compassion. Thank you." At the time of this recording, that statement no longer appears on his Facebook page, and it's unclear why it would be taken down. LaPlaca's arrest comes 12 days after a video started circulating on Facebook, reportedly of her, according to the Asbury Park Press, being removed from a fire commissioner's meeting in a nearby town. She was reportedly upset over comments being made by the public about her husband and had this to say as a parting blow to one of the citizens in attendance.
You're all proud of yourself.
You have no idea what I've been through.
Wow.
Now, this isn't the first time that LaPlaca has been arrested. In October 2023, LaPlaca, then deputy mayor, according to the New Jersey Globe, was arrested for allegedly assaulting her husband. Her husband, Carty, was also arrested. Charges in this case were later dropped, according to the New Jersey Globe. In that 2023 article from the Globe, Carty made this statement. Quote, "This was an unfortunate incident between married people living and parenting together and who love each other. It's a municipal disturbance of the peace already on its way to being resolved. I anticipate that all charges will be dropped. My wife is not responsible for or guilty of any of the charges. Gina is the victim in this and not responsible for or guilty of anything in this incident. I did not want charges filed against her." End quote. LaPlaca posted that article on her social media in 2023 as a response to the arrest being used against her ahead of the next month's election. She also stood by the statements that she and her husband made in that article. The article also mentioned a 2017 incident report where LaPlaca and Carty were in a verbal argument after LaPlaca, quote, "arrived home intoxicated." Carty later said he was at fault, and LaPlaca released this statement in 2023. Quote, "In both this most recent incident and in 2017, I was unequivocally the victim of first verbal and then then physical abuse at the hands of my partner. Sadly, these are not only my experiences with domestic violence. I suffered brutal physical and sexual abuse for nearly 9 months at the hands of a man I dated during law school. He was ultimately convicted of assault after I ended the relationship, and he broke into my apartment to attack me. I am appalled and disgusted that anyone would use my history as a DV survivor against me for political gain, and it is truly despicable that victim shaming is still in vogue in 2023. Situations like this are why so many victims are afraid to come forward. A short time after the 2023 incident, she was elected mayor of this town of roughly 12,000 people. As far as this DUI arrest, LaPlaca's husband told a local radio station in New Jersey that the mayor has been admitted to rehab. His post on Facebook, when it was up, did have several comments of support for the mayor and her journey to get help. But a public community Facebook page for Lumberton Township also had this comment, quote, "I hope that Mayor Gina LaPlaca and her family get the help they need. While I'd like to thank her and her husband Jason for what they have both done in the community, I'd also ask that they both resign from public office. It is incredibly admirable that you both want to help and serve the local community. That being said, it seems you are both overwhelmed with the turmoil going on in your personal lives. I hope you can be humble enough to realize what is best for both this community and your family." It's unclear what LaPlaca will do or whether she will resign from public office. She has a court date related to her arrest next month on April 28th. We at Law&Crime have requested the body cam video of her arrest. Joining me now is former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney John Day. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know you've worked a lot of DUI cases in your career. What stands out to you when you read this one?
You know, you see this a lot, and more recently, states have increased the penalties for people, parents, whoever, who are driving drunk with a kid in the car. But this one is potentially so tragic. I mean, obviously there were apparently warning signs for the family that something was going on, but to have a mom picking up a kid at daycare and then ultimately getting arrested for DWI, I mean, it puts that child's life in so much danger. And that's why states are now increasing the penalties for this. It usually was a misdemeanor. It still can be, but you can get charged with a felony child abuse charge if you stick a kid in a car seat and you've been drinking. And so I think that's the danger here is a kid gets hurt in an accident, somebody gets hurt, but states are trending more and more to penalizing these things more strenuously.
Yeah, and we'll see. Apparently there was video from a witness who saw the vehicle that, I mean, it was very apparent, allegedly, that the vehicle was swerving in and out of lanes, nearly hit a utility pole. You think of this with a 2-year-old strapped into a car seat in the back seat. I mean, this could have been a lot more of a dangerous situation. Talk about states kind of ramping up the charges against people who are accused of these types of crimes. At the same time, how do you see that balance out with, it does feel like we just live in a society where people are more aware that alcoholism is it's considered a disease, that it's something that someone struggles with, that they need help to be able to solve that issue. How do states balance being stronger against people who commit these types of crimes with that kind of view on the issue of alcoholism?
Well, the trend seems to be let's impose stronger punishment because, obviously, if you're defending a case like that as a defense lawyer, the first thing you want to do is get your client into treatment. You want to do a whole evaluation of the family situation. You want to get everybody on board with a treatment program as opposed to sticking them in a jail cell. But more and more state legislatures are saying, look, this is a serious situation. And so that's why the penalties are getting increasingly stronger. But, it also goes back to who has a responsibility when there's a child involved. I mean, you don't want to impose a burden on a daycare center to breath test every parent who's showing up. But if you're a position of authority, if you're a school teacher, daycare worker, something like that, and you see a situation where a child is potentially in danger, you actually have an affirmative duty in a lot of states to call the police, to report that to someone. So while you don't want to put the liability on a daycare center for letting a mom pick a kid up, at the same time, this raises the issue of, how alert do you have to be if you're running a daycare when a parent comes and picks a kid up? And obviously this situation did not end tragically, but a lot of them do.
Yeah, it certainly could have. There was apparently an open container of alcohol in the car, so that just raises just so many red flags. From a criminal defense standpoint, when you're defending a client like this, she apparently admitted to officers that she had been drinking. You had the open container in the car. I mean, how do you defend these types of cases?
Right, good question. So from a defense standpoint, the first thing you're going to do is make sure that your client is in the appropriate treatment center. I mean, if they're let out of custody, which they usually are,
Yeah.
right away you get them into treatment. And especially inpatient treatment. You don't want them to be doing an outpatient program. You throw all your resources into getting them into treatment, addressing whatever is underlying the family situation. And at that point, that's your best weapon in terms of dealing with the prosecution. You're saying, look, we're doing everything we can. She's in treatment, or wherever the client is, and we're addressing it appropriately. What you don't want to do is fight back and start attacking the community for raising the issue. And I've seen a little bit of that online in terms of, how strongly do you push back? You don't want to do that. What you want to do is immediately get a structure where the person's getting help, they're getting the right medical care. And that's the best way to get the best possible outcome for your client.
Her husband made a post on Facebook saying that she has struggled with the issue of addiction. He's apparently made some statements to media outlets as well, standing by his wife, but referencing that he says that she has a problem. As admirable as that is, she's certainly a public person, a public figure in the community as a mayor. If you're a defense attorney, could that hurt your case if you have someone who is openly saying that they have an issue with alcohol on social media? Is that, and if you're a prosecutor, can you take that and use that against them if this was to proceed forward towards a trial?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, what you want to do from a defense standpoint is, you got to acknowledge immediately that there's an issue, because that's what the focus is going to be on in the prosecution. Of course, there are a lot of questions here about what was being done prior to this. If a family knows that there's an issue, are you really letting your kid get in a car in that situation? We don't know all the family dynamics, and each family is different. Every family has their own issues, of course. But if there have been some warning signs that, mom or dad has a problem, you've got to be hyper vigilant to make sure that if your 2-year-old's getting in the car with them, that it's a safe situation. And theoretically, the other parent, the other adult in the room could actually potentially face charges if they've let this situation go on. And from a prosecutor standpoint, there are child endangerment laws that say if you let your child be put in a situation that could harm them, that could be a felony, that could be another charge. We don't know all the facts here. That hasn't been raised here, but if you're prosecuting the case, you want to go into that and figure out what's underlying this, and have all the adults in the situation been doing what they're supposed to do. On the other hand, as a defense lawyer, main issue is get them into treatment, get them to acknowledge something went wrong, take their licks, take their punishment, and say, we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again.
It doesn't appear that she's been arrested for DUI in the past. There have been some issues of domestic violence that haven't ended in any charges, but have been reported incidents. I'll get into that in a little bit, but I think about it was St. Patrick's Day. People on St. Patrick's Day, they go out, they drink. Is there a difference that the court looks at it where this was maybe if it was someone who was a one-off, that they regularly aren't a drinker, they got carried away, then they get pulled over for DUI, compared to a case where you have her husband saying she has a problem, she's had a problem, where it feels like, from at least what he's saying, that this is more of a long-term drinking problem that she has. Does the court in these cases see any difference between those two type of scenarios?
Well, I think that's a good point, but I think the thing a court would look at in particular, in this case, this was someone who was an elected official. This was someone who had a position of authority. And that's why you're going to get even more increased scrutiny, because the court's going to say, look, you have responsibility not just to your family, but to the community at large. And I think you're going to be treated with much more scrutiny, and ultimately maybe much more harsh penalty, because you are in a position of authority, because you're an elected official. Now, people will say, well, they should be treated like anybody else. Sure. But at the same time, if you're going to voluntarily take on the role of a leader, of an elected leader, a position of power, a position of authority, you got to understand you're going to get scrutinized, and you got to understand if you mess up, it could potentially be much worse, because you are seen as a leader in the community. So as a defense lawyer, I'd be trying to mitigate that as much as possible. I'd be concerned about that. That's why I think early apologies, early public acknowledgement of what's going on is not a bad strategy in a case like this.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point because you have, I think, two schools of thought. One is she should be treated just like anybody else would if they were pulled over, in the shocking details that she was apparently pulled over with, kid in the car, bottle of alcohol or can of alcohol, whatever it was, open container in the vehicle. But then also, she's the mayor. She's the person who should be held to this higher standard. She's paid by taxpayer dollars, and she should be held to perhaps a harsher punishment. Typically, how do the courts see that, where you're kind of battling these two schools of thought of more scrutiny, but also at the same time, she is just a regular citizen like anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, but it comes with the territory. If you were going to, and you got to admire people who run for elective office. I mean, it comes with a lot of scrutiny. You're
Tough
not going
job.
to get it as an
Yeah.
ordinary citizen, but at the same time, with that glory comes a lot of attention. And I'm thinking back to, I've had clients in the past, film, TV, music people who gotten in situations, and I've always thought the best strategy: go in there, acknowledge it, apologize, stop the discussion in its tracks. People can be forgiving if they feel like you're being sincere in addressing a problem. What I think the general consensus is, if you try to fight back and you're not willing to acknowledge a problem, you're not willing to apologize, that's when it gets much more difficult. That's when you're going to spend a lot of time fighting it out. But if you can get in there and get an early resolution that includes a general acknowledgement and acceptance of doing something wrong and saying, look, I'm trying to fix this, people can be forgiving. I mean, everybody has a family member or a friend who's gone through something similar. So in that sense, if you can latch on to that public forgiveness and be sincere and genuinely sincere in how you address it, you might survive that.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's uncommon for someone on their first DUI to go to prison for that, serve jail time. But you do have this child endangerment charge she's facing as well. Could that actually end up being more of an issue for her as opposed to just the driving while intoxicated charge that she's facing?
Right. If you're in a car by yourself, you get a DWI, that's one thing. You have a 2-year-old strapped into a car seat in the back. It just raises it to a whole different level. And that's why states are increasing the penalties. But again, it's not just a mayor who gets a DWI, it's a mayor who gets a DWI with a child in the back seat. So that's why I would expect this to be treated with a lot of scrutiny by the prosecution and ultimately by the courts. That's why if you're defending it, you got to really jump on the acceptance of responsibility and forgiveness part, because that's going to ultimately benefit the client. And it has to be sincere too. People see right through the insincerity of a fake apology and a fake acknowledgement of acceptance. That's why you got to really make sure this person means it when they say, I'm sorry.
Right. And especially when you're a politician, I feel like these days, I mean, anybody can look up what approval ratings are for just people who work in politics, no matter the political party. It's a challenge. She does have a history. It was reported, at least in 2017 and in 2023, that there were some incidents of alleged domestic violence. No charges were ever filed. It was between her and her husband. He apologized, saying that it was his fault in both instances, but that has made headlines in the past. She was recently escorted out of a town fire commission meeting and had a pretty vulgar thing to say to one of the people who are criticizing her husband, who is up for a promotion in the fire department. Could all of that factor into how this case plays out, because she is a mayor and also facing some pretty shocking charges when it comes to the DUI?
Sure, your record, and of course, we know anyone can go online and get the past of these folks. All that's going to figure into things like prosecutors, not only a charging decision, but how you're going to resolve a case. Ultimately, if it gets before a judge, how the judge is going to wind up sentencing, if that's where it gets to. So your history is part of the package. It's part of the book that's handed out when the prosecutors are looking at you and the court's looking at you. But again, on the other side, I mean, people can be forgiving. People understand that things happen. It's just a level of trying to grasp how serious were the red flags in the past, and was there any intervention done? Did anyone say, hey, you're on a path that's going to lead to a problem down the road? You see lots of times, you see situations where people get intervention for some type of substance issue, it works and they get put on the right path. They don't have any more problems with the justice system. But in a case like this, obviously you're a prominent person in the community, you're elected official. So what you've done in the past is going to be looked at as like the preceding chapters in a book, and it's going to make a difference.
And not to ask you a political question, but if you were her defense attorney, would you recommend she resign from office?
I mean, I would. That would be my to get the best possible result for your client. You know, an immediate resignation, an immediate letter of apology. I'm doing everything I can to address this. I made a mistake. You know, I know this could have been a disaster. I had this responsibility to the community. I didn't fulfill it. I mean, if you want to get the best possible outcome, that's the way to do it. I've seen the other side. I've seen people fight tooth and nail saying, I'm not going to apologize. You know, I made a mistake. I slipped up, but I still like my position of power. And of course, ultimately, it would be up to voters in the community to decide, do we still want this person to continue in office? My view has always been accept responsibility on something like that quickly, acknowledge what you did. A resignation would be a good step, but you know, I'm not defending her. So.
Right. No, and I guess my last question and solving the issue of alcoholism is a loaded question that we wouldn't be able to solve today. But have you seen in your experience better outcomes when it comes to the harsher punishment that someone may face, or more of the path of court-ordered rehab and more of those types of approaches when it comes to what comes on the other side of the legal process with DUIs?
Right. Well, you know, again, in the past, these were generally treated as misdemeanor offenses. Even if you had a child in the car, it would be, a lot of jurisdictions still had it as misdemeanor. Now states are generally beefing up those penalties. But ultimately, when you are looking at a child abuse felony versus a misdemeanor, that's a huge difference in terms of whether there's any regard ahead of time for what you're going to do. But it also, I think it gets back to the issue of what are the families doing? I mean, if you are a family member and you know that mom or dad or grandpa or whoever is routinely putting your 2-year-old in the car seat and driving drunk. I mean, this was St. Patrick's Day too, so there might have, you might think there would have been a little more scrutiny of what's going on, but you know, it depends on how much of a deterrence that is. And I think these penalties that are now felonies are certainly theoretically supposed to deter that. And I think they probably are having some effect.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. This is definitely a shocking case when you read it. John Day, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for coming on.
Good to see you.
LaPlaca isn't the only elected official to recently be in trouble for allegedly driving under the influence.
What's going on? You were stopped at that light for a while.
No, I was just parking.
That's Enrique Sanchez, a Democrat in the Rhode Island House of Representatives, and this is newly released body cam video of his arrest in February. Police in Cranston pulled him over and charged him with DUI.
Keep going.
Okay.
All right, so do you want to consent to some field sobriety tests? Keep your hands out of your pockets.
Yeah. So
Keep your hands out of your pockets.
Okay. So
Keep your hands out of your pockets.
Okay. So
It's a yes or no question. Do you want to do some field sobriety tests now?
Yeah.
Or no? It's your choice.
Okay, so if I request to do no, can I order Uber?
No. Sanchez has pleaded not guilty to the charges. For On the Case presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.